Hola, amigas. I'm Norma, your host here at the Latinas en Libros Book Club. I'm so excited to welcome you to this month's Latinas en Libros book chat series. We're so thrilled to kick off the fall series with a breakout author in celebration of his debut novel, Where There Was Fire. This book tells us a beautiful story of a Costa Rican family with a deadly secret. A lethal fire erupts in the American Fruit Company's most lucrative banana plantation, burning all evidence of a massive and ugly cover-up, and the future Teresa Cepeda Valverde's family is changed forever. 27 years later, Teresa and her daughter Lida are still trying to pick up the pieces. The story is brimming with ancestral spirits, omens, and anthropomorphic forces of nature. Amigas, please join me in welcoming the author of Where There Was Fire, John Manuel Arias.
Hola, thank you. Hola, amigas. Hola, amores. Thank you, Norma, for having me. This is a joy. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited that you're here. I can't wait. So amigas, John and I were chatting a couple minutes ago, and I have so many questions, and I really just want to thank you for making time and being here today. I can't wait to dive in. This is a huge accomplishment. I have so many questions. Where to begin? Amigas, if you have read this book, I know you are going to have a lot of questions, so please feel free to add them to the chat box, and we will do our best to get to a lot of them. We'll ask you to come up and unmute and ask your question directly. In the meantime, let's dive in, John. Well, and actually, before we get to the details, before we start really talking about some of the juicy parts of this beautiful novel, I would love to chat a bit about your abuelita and the impact she had on you as a writer, as a storyteller. Can you tell us a little bit about your abuelita's influence and how her influence helped you write this particular story?
Yeah, she's my girl. I love her. When I was a kid, my grandparents were actually living in the US. So I was born and raised in DC, but my parents were working so much that during the day I was being taken care of by my grandparents. And by grandparents, I mean my grandmother. And so she, until the age of 5, would create these stories for me. She would spin these tales, and they were usually sort of encapsulated this really precocious dinosaur named Mario. I really love dinosaurs, as like all toddlers do. And she would put Mario through these trials and tribulations of not burning down the house, of crossing the street without an adult, all of these things, right? And I learned from that really, really, really young age to be captivated. And with that same energy, I want to captivate with my writing. And, you know, that same energy she brought for me when I was in my 20s. And I went to go live with her in Costa Rica for about 4 years. And she would tell me stories, only they were the truth. They were real. They were history about our family. And so it was with that same enthralling tone, my coffee would go cold just listening to all of these facts about my family. And that's really what really good storytelling does. It makes your coffee go cold, and it makes you, it's true.
And it
It's
makes
so
your beer
true.
get warm.
It's true. It's so true. Your beer is just shaking, and it's just like, oh my God, I didn't know that happened.
Right?
Yeah.
So now for those amigas who haven't picked up Where There Was Fire yet, can you tell us a little bit about how the story unfolds?
Sure. I don't believe in linear time. I feel like no Latina people do. No Latin Americans believe in linear time. So of course it's not told in linear time. I threw out chronology, and I take you bit by bit about what's happening 30 years after this really destructive incident. And so we go to the family afterwards, we go to the incident, and we're just piecing together a puzzle. So I'm creating as a writer this puzzle for you all to put together. And hopefully by the end, you step back and you say, oh, what a beautiful, but also ugly thing, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do. I had I had a lot of feelings that came up as I was reading this. And I love that you use the analogy of a puzzle, because that's really what it felt like. It felt like you were taking on the reader on this ride where we were gently pulling back layers upon layers and lifting up like little stones so that we could take a peek and see what was happening. It's really the way you wrote it is captivating. So
Thank you.
I want to sort of start at the end. In your acknowledgement,
Sure.
you write, I want to thank those who inspired this novel, the many ancestors who visited me in my dreams and when I was awake, the many whose laughter I was lucky enough to behold, but who have since passed. You will live on in these characters. I loved you in life, and you will be loved forever on the page. Can you share with our amigas a little bit more about whether specific people inspired some of the characters or the story development?
Yeah. So the really beautiful thing is that outside of family, you have community.
Right.
And that community really came together to inspire a lot of parts of the novel. And so there's, I like to say the novel is a parallel family history. It's a parallel universe of Costa Rica itself, right? And so I took a lot of, we can think of it as a theater production. I took a lot of the characters and players and I just recast them in this next universe. So it's just a revival of a play. And so neighbors and great aunts and really hilarious people whose laughs I heard, they had to make it in because, it was a way of immortalizing them in a way for me too, seeing my grandmother's best friend or her husband or my three tias was really important for me to see. I know. Yeah, the three Marias maybe be
Like,
real.
I know
They
where
they
you're
might be
going.
real. They might be real people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe not. We'll see.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so will you tell us a little bit more about the title of the book? Are there secondary references, symbolisms that readers should be aware of?
Totally. So where there was fire, it comes from this proverb in Costa Rica, and I'm sure throughout Latin America as well, is donde hubo fuego, cenizas quedan. Where there was fire, ashes remain. And so that proverb is used when something passionate happens, and you can always tell that something remains. But in the novel, it took on a really different meaning. And where there was fire, fire can sometimes and usually be an erasing force. It can be a way of covering up and destroying the past. But those ashes, they remind us that something was actually there. They're the proof that people existed, that histories existed. And that's what I really wanted to focus on.
I love that. It's fascinating to think about how so often fire does erase history, locations, everything everything in its path. And yet out of La Ceniza enables growth and healing
Yes.
in many different ways. And I think that's one of the beautiful themes that pop up in this book. You really drive that home, sort of how the past is present. So while we're on the topic of fire,
Sure.
let's talk about the fire. So the backdrop for a lot of what happens in this book is some controlled sort of, it's in the hands of, in many ways, a multinational agricultural company and its agents, because the agents are also up in everyone's business. So in the book, you're really showing the reader how corporate greed, unchecked corporate existence in Costa Rica really affected the family of the life of one particular family. Can you tell us a little bit more about the American Fruit Company, the role in the novel, and what did you want the readers to take away from the AFC storyline?
The AFC became, so I know there are a lot of probably Central Americans in the audience, a lot of South Americans, and our histories are inextricable from bananas. And this fruit sort of took over the world, and it did so with the help of the United Fruit Company. A lot of us know that today is Chiquita Bananas. And Dole Fruit, which was the standard fruit company, was just as evil. And so to have those two forces together sort of had those uh, cartoonishly evil corporation. I brought them together and I married them into the American Fruit Company. And there is a particular agent, right, that is used. It's not a human agent. It is actually a poison. It is a pesticide that is used to protect the bananas, but actually puts the humans who work on the plantations at risk. And I don't want to spoil the novel, but I guess I'll spoil history a little bit. And in the 1960s, Dole, standard fruit, used this pesticide called Nemagon. And it's got this really big, scary villain's name, and it was exactly that. It sterilized 30,000 Costa Ricans in 10 years. And the Standard Fruit Company, today Dole, knew exactly what it was doing. And they used it because it drove up profits. It was cheap and it was useful, and they didn't care. They knew that justice wasn't going to fight for these people, but people are still fighting for that justice even 50 years later. And so I was hoping to highlight that aspect, that fight in the novel. And so that's why the American Fruit Company, with its like very big overarching reality, right? Because it looks like these fruit companies in the last 100 or so years, I really wanted to get down to the muck and the dirt that these people were living in daily.
I think that you did such a beautiful job. And, you know, it's Costa Rica's history, but it's also the history of so many other countries. So many individuals, families, generations
Yes.
have been affected by unchecked corporate greed. Really, that's what we're talking about, because
Mhm.
we now know that so many of these companies knew that there was a real, tangible danger posed to all of it, to everyone that, you know, came in contact with a lot of these chemicals, and they continue to use them. And you see them, I mean, you see that even in the United States. So
Yeah.
I'm not from,
Nemagon was used in California, actually.
yeah.
It's
So
still in the groundwater. It's
it's,
still in the water tables. It's really intense.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is our, I think it's one of the things that unites a lot, or, you know, connects a lot of us
Yeah.
as children or descendants of Latin Americans, you
Yeah.
know, and so it was beautiful to see the way that you really tied it all together. And you weren't afraid to call it what it was. You weren't afraid to go there and investigate it and look at it and really create this magical landscape among this like really difficult history that so many of us have been affected by. So I really loved it. Like I feel like I have not read a book like this.
Oh,
I don't
thank
know,
you.
ever.
I
Like,
really appreciate that.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's beautiful. Like it really is. And so, amigas, before you start thinking like, wait, what are we talking about here? I want you to know that this novel is so much more than a commentary on corporate misconduct. Okay, so let's get that straight. At the heart of the novel, we find love, we find friendship, jealousy, sorrow. We find all kinds of things here. So I just want to make sure that amigas understand that this is the backdrop, and that the AFC in this novel really does play a big role in a lot of the lives. And the beautiful thing about your writing, John, is that you give us so much to look forward to. And so you give us, I almost kind of felt like it was a mystery at times, because I was like, oh, what's going to happen? No, she didn't. Oh, what? Okay. So let's talk about Teresa for a minute. One of your main characters. She's really complex. So she rejects social norms. She marries for love. She abandons her children. And she also suffers tremendous tragic losses. You write, mothers like Teresa hope above all else that they'll be graded on a curve. I wasn't as bad as they want to say, at least but that's not the case and has never been. Even if a mother does her best, her children will reproach her for some reason or another. They'll judge and rebel and kick and punch and insult everything she did or didn't do. They'll act like children, even if they're adults. This really resonated with me. Can you tell us a little bit more about Teresa's desire to make things right with her daughter and her grandchildren?
Teresa borrowed a lot. Her life force came a lot from my grandmother, and my family history is very complicated. And obviously, relationships, including my own to everybody, is all very complicated. And I remember one time my aunt was sitting down with me and she's like, well, I could reproach my mother for everything, but she's like, I'm a mom now. And I see that they're going to reproach me too. It's just this cycle where, one, being a child of a parent really sucks. Being a kid sucks. It's terrible being a child. It's not fun, right? Because we have people who we are born to who have to take care of us and also not traumatize us. And that's pretty difficult for them. So being a parent also sucks, right? It is this really difficult relationship that we all hold. And Teresa particularly has a difficult relationship with her daughters because she has a difficult relationship with her own mother. And so her own mother didn't teach her how to properly love herself. And so how can she properly love her daughters? So all the characters in the novel, they have a lot of dignity in the way that they parent because it's a generous narrative to them. But we see over and over how they mess up, how they're not perfect, even though they're trying to do the best that they can. And so Teresa is really that shining, that like beating heart of, can she absolve herself of her sins, and how does she do so?
I love that. And, one of the things that I am reminded as I hear you speak about Teresa and the way that she didn't get love from her own mother is the cyclical nature of some of these traumas, right? So many of the characters, Jose Maria, Teresa, Amarga, even Gabriel, to a certain extent, they're desperately trying to escape ancestral traumas. You do such a beautiful job of showing readers how the past is present and how it's all connected unless we actively try to change it. Can you tell us a little bit about ancestral trauma and the role that it plays? I know you talked about it a little bit, but I'd love to address it straight on. And I'm curious, about the role that it plays for the characters and why it was so important for you to include it in this way.
Of course, ancestral trauma, so many things are passed down to us. And sometimes we have something called blood memory, which is where even in our bones, even in our dreams, we feel the traumas that have happened to those before us. And so those ancestral traumas might come back in the book as ghosts. And they're not like really big haunting ghosts. They're not super scary. They're just kind of bored. And they're sitting next to the living, trying to tell them that there's really no difference between these two states. Sorry?
Oh, yeah. They're trying to whisper in the ear.
Yes, exactly. And these traumas are really important because these traumas are inflicted with the help of systems. And these systems continue throughout the generations. So machismo continues, corporate greed continues, the pressure of Marianismo continues. And so these traumas become birthrights, and they're sort of notarized by these systems. And how can Teresa or Lira or Carmen fight against Marianismo? How can Jose Maria or the other men fight against the pressures, right? The expectation of machismo? And how do they succeed? And how do they fail?
It was very enlightening and just, I felt so sad at times when I was reading some of the stories. Some of the threads really pulled at my heartstring, and I feel like we can't talk about the ancestral trauma that takes place in the book without also addressing some of the ancestral gifts that you gave some of your characters. So the characters openly acknowledge that some of the members of the family have special gifts. Let's talk about Carmen and the gift that you gave her and why you gave her that specific ability.
Carmen she is an empath through and through, and like an actual empath. So I imagined Carmen as a Cancer, the zodiac sign, in its like most exaggerated form. It's like, what would a Cancer do if they were the ultimate Cancer? They would cry a lot and they would also hear other people's thoughts. And that's where Carmen was born. She is this incredibly sweet, loving human being who also has the gift, but also at times the curse of listening to other people's thoughts, or if she hears something inside their head, she wants to give it to them, but they are frightened by her ability. And so it is this la dulzura, verdad? She is this ultimate sweetheart, and this empathy is a manifestation of that. And sometimes it can really curse her, but she wants it to be a gift to the world. And in her adulthood, she eventually does. There's this line that I was very proud of, that she finally began to tell people what she thought, actually what they thought.
That's right. I love that. That was such a
Yeah.
great line. And I have to, so since we're on the topic of Carmen, and I know some of the amigas haven't read the book, and I have to ask you because you're here, and I'm sure there are amigas who have read the book. Tell us more about her decision to leave this physical world. I felt like that was such a moving and unresolved part of the story for all of the characters. I was just like, I need to know what happened. What was she thinking? Tell us about that.
That was very difficult. And for the amigas, it's not too much of a spoiler. It happens like 10 pages in, where Carmen eventually she jumps out of a window after her baby is born. And the numbers don't lie that mothers or parents who have experienced great trauma are at higher risk of having postpartum depression. And I really wanted, the book talks a lot about motherhood and fertility, and I wanted to address that as well, but with as much dignity for Carmen as possible. And that suicide reverberates for the living. All that we know is that Carmen has killed herself, right? That she has taken her own destiny into her own hands, and whether or not the characters believe that it was correct, or how it affects them, is the, it's at their decision, right? And it feels unresolved because a lot of the times suicide is unresolved. Even if we know what the person is thinking, it is a very intense thing to do. And sometimes people feel that it is what they need to do. And there is, in my mind, respect towards that too. Everyone has the right to take their own destiny in their own hands, but it doesn't usually feel great for those of us who remain, and also for that person who decided to do that as well. Yeah. So it was a balancing act with Carmen. And as a writer, I wanted to do my best for her. And the only way that I could do my best for her was to love her as much as I loved everybody else, and as much as she loved everybody else in the novel. So just to really treat it with as much kindness and as much grace as possible.
I think you did a fabulous job. And I think there was the part of me that was just kind of like, wait, what happened? ¿Qué le pasó? ¿Por qué? Cuéntame todo. And I think that is it's such a reflection of your writing and the way you bring people into the story. And to me, I couldn't help but to also think about, wait, so was it her ancestral gift that drove her to that? Was it unresolved? Was it other unresolved family trauma? Yeah, it just, I feel like in that way, the story mirrors so many of the questions that we ask ourselves in real life.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think it was so thoughtful and beautiful and suspenseful. Like it was everything. It really was. It was gorgeous. And I had to ask because I think that
Thank you.
readers would probably be curious.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's switch it up a little bit. Let's talk all things toads and anthropomorphism. Could you please tell the amigas the role that toads play in this novel and why you included them, and just what inspired you?
There was one time that I was in Costa Rica and me and my family went to this hostel by the beach. If anyone knows Costa Rica, we went to Limon and we're in this like nighttime beach hostel. And my grandmother has this great book called Leyendas Costarricenses. And so she's reading about La Cegua and La Llorona, El Padre Sin Cabeza, et cetera, et cetera. And we just heard this devil song in the darkness. It was like, it was so demonic and so loud. And we figured out that it was these toads that live in that part of Costa Rica, and they're called cane toads. They're the largest toads, and they're really scary looking. They're poisonous, they're gigantic, and they sing this devil's song. And I knew that that hideous demonic creature had to make it on these pages. It had to, because it's called a cane toad because it eats pests in sugarcane fields. And it is poisonous to humans. And what else? It protects crops. And what else is poisonous? And I thought to this poison called nemagon. And I thought, what parallel could there be that an animal and a pesticide have so much in common? And I knew that it had to, be there right on those pages and had to show itself right to the characters.
I was creeped out in the best way. So
it's so creepy.
It's so creepy. It's so creepy. Like, amigas, this is not there's no horror here, really. This is not about the toad gets up and like stabs. Like that's not what this is about. It's just, John, your ability to create suspense and to leave the reader thinking, wait, what just happened? What's gonna happen? I loved it. It's such a suspenseful part of the novel. And the way the toads, the way that they're croaking, the way the sound that they make, the way it's all sort of woven together. I mean, beyond, John, beyond, really. Like,
thank you. I appreciate you.
What happens in your brain when you're sleeping? Because I'm just like, this.
I don't want anyone to spend more than like 5 minutes in my brain because my synapses just go. It's so weird how something happens and my brain goes right there. And so honestly, being in my brain is a little bit cuckoo bananas. But
well, I love it. The reader is gonna love it.
It makes for really good toads, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, really, I was fascinated. I felt like there was no way I could have this conversation and not ask you about the toads and not ask you like, what? I mean, where did you, yes, everything that we just talked about. It's fascinating. Ladies, you're going to, I mean, this is good. This is good. This is good. Yeah. Okay. So let's switch gears again. Let's talk a little bit about colorism, class, and amarga.
Yeah.
First of all, amarga, the name, I loved it.
It's like, I wonder what she could be like.
Right? I'm like, Okay. So I loved the way that Amarga's character is layered and deep. And you're letting us know a little, you gave us insight into why she was kind of awful. And part of that had to do with her skin color and the way that played out in her life, and the way that her father treated her because of her skin, and in turn, the way she treated her child and her grandchildren. So will you tell us a little bit about Amarga's relationship with colorism?
Colorism was really important for me to tackle in the book because there is colorism in my family, there is colorism in my community, and at a national scale in Costa Rica, which is a very particular type of colorism and racism that influences its nationalism all across Latin America. We've all heard our family members either very sweetly or disparagingly be called negra, right? My grandmother to the rest of the family is la negra, right? And so how can these compliments also uphold a system of colorism, right? And how is that treatment different? So for Amarga, she never received that treatment in any way that was sweetly. Her father is this white, wealthy coffee baron who cornered her indigenous mother, and she is born out of wedlock, and he treats her terribly. And then Amarga later in life has a daughter who reminds her of herself. And there's a line in the book where her father's ghost, every time she looked upon her daughter, her father's ghost crept into her mouth like a gun, took aim, and fired. She reproduced this system without her wanting to, because none of us ever want to reproduce our systems, right? That marginalize us, that make us feel bad. And Amarga then becomes sort of like this. She has a lot of pathos, right? She's kind of this absurd person because on the page we love her. We know that she's a jerk. We know that she's mean to everyone around her, but we also know where she comes from and what she does at the end of her life as well, which is so important. It's like to treat Amarga, like I said, like Carmen and the other characters, with as much love as possible, and really meeting her where she was, because she's in a very particular place geographically, generationally, and how does she respond to what was done to her?
I really enjoyed the conversation around colorism. I think it's always an important topic to tackle, and I loved the way that you framed it and the way you really show the reader how it affects so many of us, and the trickle, the ripple effect when you are subjected to that kind of self-hatred, really, because
Yeah.
it just falls down the family lines.
It's true.
It was really powerful. That
Hmm.
entire conversation was super powerful. So thank you for including that.
Thank
So
you.
we are running a little, we're actually ahead of schedule. Can I ask you?
Ah.
I know, we're like, we're on this, John. Can I ask you a question that's not on our list? That I'd love to talk a little bit about Jose Maria.
Yeah.
I mean, so many tragedies
Hmm.
have fallen on Jose Maria's shoulders. And as a father, as the head of a household, I really wanted to love him more, and I found myself just so battling these feelings of like, you're not a nice human. You've done some really bad things. How did you balance Jose Maria's character? Will you talk to us a little bit more about some of the challenges that he's encountered, and why you left readers with this like total love-hate relationship with him, total love-hate, and also tenderness. It's really
Yeah, it's the book, what it really does is it complicates your understanding of like who a person is and how they can be. Like no one is black and white.
That's right.
They're all different shades of gray, and Jose Maria is this um he leaves a bad taste in your mouth, but because of the systems that he represents, because he is the ultimate expression of machismo, right? But also he is a person who is at the um, the end of the barrel of the gun of this fruit company, right? So how are systems acting upon him, and is he acting upon other systems, right? I needed to be very clear in the book that uh, Jose Maria is not a good person. But also, the narrative is important to show that we all get to a place where we are when we're not bad people. Just like Amarga, just like Teresa, who abandons her daughter, just as they're given space, the narrative gives him the same space. Because it's important, because it's not interesting to read a book where the characters are black and white. That makes it too easy, and life's not easy. And so he's a character where, I said it to my friend the other day. I was just like, oh yeah, he's a drunk. And she goes, I don't see him as a drunk. She's protecting him, right? Not protecting him, but she's saying, I don't see him as a drunk. I see him like as a really traumatized guy who's so-and-so died, and he's just this. And I'm like, okay, I did something right. Me as the author, I'm saying, oh, this is just this one note. And my friend goes, no. Which is important to do for, as writers, for those of us who are writers, and those of us who are readers as well, to give a lot of space for people to be bad people on the page and to fuck up on the page, but also to give as much grace as possible, because it's really important to operate in our daily lives, to give a lot of grace, even if, even if the results are pretty awful. But they can, we can condemn the systems and we can condemn the people for doing awful things, but they're also, it's good to give a little bit of grace sometimes.
That's beautiful, John. That really is. I think that one of the things that I'm going to take away from our conversation is this idea of giving people grace, because one of the things that I think that readers are going to really enjoy about this book is the way in which you develop these characters. They are not linear. They are not black or white. They are complex AF. I mean, if they really mirror what happens in the world, and the idea that sort of a hurt person hurts other people really comes to mind with several characters, but I think in particular with Jose Maria, given what he ends up doing in the story. And you also give so much light, and you let readers into some of the really tragic experiences that he has encountered. So I feel like, amigas, if we can all walk away today giving ourselves and other people grace and space, I think that's just, those are beautiful thoughts, John. So speaking of beautiful thoughts, let's start wrapping it up with a conversation about love. This book is filled with gorgeous love threads. I mean, you have stories, you have like love stories that are platonic, some are romantic, some are familiar, some are straight, some are queer. Like, it's like so many love stories, so many beautiful threads, you're just like, oh, look at that. The connection. I love the connection that so many of the characters are allowed to experience. So I wanted to ask you two questions. How does love balance out some of the tragedy that happened in this story? And then the second question is, did you have a favorite love story in this book?
It's a wonderful question, because I tried to infuse the novel with as much joy, because it's a heavy book. It's a super, super, super heavy book. And I wouldn't be doing my duty as a writer without injecting it with some love, without injecting it with some joy, with some comedy. And so those love stories really came through. It's like the light up from the darkness, you know what I mean? And I had a professor in college. I was working on a chapter and she was looking it over, and I wrote about a funeral, and she points her finger and she goes, you need a wedding right here. And she was telling me, you need to balance. You always need to balance the bad with the good, and vice versa, because it is a cycle, right? And so the love was really, really important to, and that's what made these characters real, because you can't have just trauma on every page. That's not what it's like to be human. It's
That's
not
right.
what real life is like. You know, we can be incredibly traumatized, myself, but still laugh. We still need to uh, figure out and seek that joy. And one of my favorite, I guess my favorite love is the love between Teresa and Gabriel, which is grandmother and grandson, because they have, you know, they don't, I guess I'm not trying to spoil it a little bit. Um, how can I do it without
I think it's
spoiling
okay.
it?
I think honestly, I think that at this point in the conversation, we could talk freely
Yeah.
about all the details. We could spill all the juicy
Okay,
details. It's all good.
cool. So Teresa is not allowed to tell Gabriel that she is his grandmother, and he has no idea. But there is this instantaneous, not sexual attraction, but this attraction of this really kind woman to him, and it's like a magnet to each other. And it's this really beautiful thing where Teresa sees him as her chance at redemption, and he is just gravitating towards her because she loves him. And it's this really complicated love story throughout the book, right? Because love, like you said, is platonic, it's familiar, it's romantic, and this one was the most complicated, I think, and my favorite.
I love that. Can I tell you that I really enjoyed the connection between Teresa and her grandson, but I also really, really liked the way that the connection, albeit very small, it's a small
Mhm.
part in the book, but um, I love Hector and Jose Maria's connection.
Everyone loves them. It's so funny.
I love that. Actually, that love story
Yeah,
might have been my favorite, even though it
yeah.
ends up in this like super tragic
Yeah, that
thing.
one's really resonating. I'm very surprised. Like as a writer, I'm very surprised by how deeply it's resonating. It's great.
Well, because I think part of it, there's this tenderness to
Hmm.
the way in which you um, connect these two humans, and I feel like um, it just feels so innocent and yet powerful, and one of them dies for the other one, like I
Yeah.
mean, it's just so romantic and complicated and
Mhm.
just intense. But yeah, that was my favorite.
I love that you loved it. That's great. I love
uh,
it.
yeah, it was beautiful. Okay, so we are at 4:45. I want to make sure that we have a couple of minutes to ask questions, to make sure that we remind our amigas, if you have questions, please drop them in the box for us. So while we're waiting for the collection of questions to come in, I would love to know a little. I'm talking to you a little bit more, John, because
Yeah,
I
I'm here.
come
Open
on,
book. I'm
I
an
love
open
chatting.
book.
So while we get some questions, let's can we talk about Hector and Jose Maria?
Sure.
Are you up for that? Yeah.
Hmm.
So tell us so do you want to set it up, since I'd love for the amigas to hear it from you.
Sure. Let's spoiler alert. If
Yeah.
you don't want spoilers, leave now. Just kidding. Don't leave. Don't leave.
Earmuffs, just earmuffs,
Yeah,
earmuffs.
just earmuffs. Just earmuffs. Jose Maria, after meeting Teresa when he's 18, promises his hand in marriage. Very galan, right? And he starts wandering the province after she leaves for work. And he stumbles upon these brothers in a bar who end up being the sons of this patriarch who owns vast farmland and has a ranch. And the youngest son is his age, and there is this really unspoken, and they're not even aware of it, this attraction and familiarity to each other. And it starts growing, and it starts growing in this campo, right, on this farmland. And there are forces that seek to divide them, even though whether those forces are a person or machismo itself that is just seeking to drive them apart. And it is really complicated, and it becomes super tragic. And for those who haven't read it, it includes gigantic elephant-sized boars who are hurtling through the forest. So, you know, you got toads and you got boars.
It was so intense. And I mean, one of the reasons why this love story is my favorite, I think when it comes down to it, it's rare to see this kind of connection so gently and beautifully, and the way it unfolds, like the way it unravels, you don't really know what's going to happen, and you just gently lead the reader into this connection that they end up having. And it's complicated for, I think, both of them, but for sure it's complicated for Jose Maria. And the family is definitely not having it. And, you know, I think as a reader, I walked away thinking, it's so tragic the way in which certain systems and certain customs and certain beliefs really stand in the way of true connection. And I think that was one of the reasons why this was my favorite love story, because I felt like it was such a reflection of what could be, and the innocence and the beauty of love, and how love is often controlled, manipulated by outside forces.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Hector.
Okay. So I don't think we have any questions quite yet. So let me ask you. What's next? We started talking about this, and I was like, I don't want to talk to you about this while we're during our chat, but I can tell you, I really feel this book lends itself to either movie or film. Can readers be excited about this potential outcome? And will there be another book? Because, amigas, spoiler alert, it doesn't end the way you think it might end. And I feel like we're set up for another book. John, no need to like confirm or deny at this point, but tell us a little bit more about what's next.
It's very funny because that's what I'm hearing. I love the screen idea. I would love to see it adapted. Because of the way that the book unfolds, I think it lends itself to a limited series. And so that's what I'm sort of focused on. And so film agent, do your magic. And she will. And as for a sequel, a lot of people are asking for if I'm planning a sequel. I didn't realize that I had, I love novels that end open-endedly because it challenges us as readers. It really does. We like a clean ending, but an open ending really challenges us to sit with the book and say, am I mad at you for being open-ended, or does this tell me about humanity? And what I wanted was the latter for the book. But I guess in the way that I did it, everyone thinks that there could be a sequel, and I had never even thought of it. And so, yeah, maybe like in 20 years, I'll pull like a Cristina Garcia, like Dreaming in Cuban, Vanishing Maps, maybe in 2043. I got you.
Okay, you'll come back. We'll still be having these conversations. Well, I'm so excited to see what's next. So we have a question here. I don't know if Alicia, if you're still here. We have a couple of minutes left. So John, do you mind if we go to questions? Yeah. So Alicia,
hello, Alicia.
If you're still here, can you unmute yourself?
Hi.
I love the glasses.
I love the glasses.
Yes. Oh, Alicia, you're going to be our new best friend.
Well, first, this is my first joining of a book club meeting, and it worked out very serendipitously because I actually happen to live in San Jose.
En Costa Rica.
Sí.
Espectacular. Oh my gosh. What part?
I live in Barrio Escalante.
Yo soy de Barrio Escalante. My family's. How long have you lived there?
5 years.
5 years. Okay, so you don't remember El Gato Negro, the creperie.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, there used to be a creperie on the corner of Intensa and La Calle 33. I had a
Mhm.
creperie there,
Oh, no way.
right on that corner. Anyway, I'm sorry, your question.
No. Well, yeah, first, like I said, it was just interesting that this was the first book that I'm reading as part of this new group, and it happened to be something that touched on so many things that I'm familiar with on a day-to-day basis. I laughed hysterically when you talked about the Watchman as like a mafia, because my husband says that all the time, and I actually read that aloud to him. But my question was more like for fun, out of curiosity, if you had expanded the book by a few additional chapters or by 50 pages or so, if there's a secondary character that you would have expanded or developed their storyline a bit more, because obviously you had so many characters to work with that out of space, out of time, you couldn't do that. But just wondering if there was one that you thought of or maybe would have. And then if you're able to answer the second question, if you talked about how you pulled elements of different characters from people your family, etc. But I'm wondering also, are there elements of the characters that you pulled from yourself?
Oh, yes, both of those questions. Thank you. So the book used to be longer. So there were characters who unfortunately did not make the cut. And by the cut, I mean my editor. But she was right that there were a lot of characters to balance, and it was asking a lot for readers to juggle that many names and that many personalities. But there was another friend of Teresa whose name was Sulay, and she was a very, very fun character. She knew the three Marias. She was married to a priest, and it was really, she was a joy. And so it hurt a lot when I had to cut her. It was a bummer. And yeah, being a writer, we pull from other people's experiences, but we also pull from our experiences as well. So there's definitely, if not an autobiographical element, there is the element of conversations that I've had, or things that I've seen and witnessed and felt, politics that might be there, right? There can be remnants in there. But yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for answering.
Thank you, Alicia, for joining us. And thank you for those really thoughtful questions. I think that given the time, I think we might end here. John, how do you feel about that? Yeah, I know.
Very
I
sad.
don't want to say goodbye. I feel like I could
Yeah.
I could ask you so many other questions. But I want to be respectful of your time, and I want to be mindful just of your energy. I know that you are doing a lot these days. So I want to thank you, John, for sharing space with us today. Congratulations again on your debut novel. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Amigas, if you haven't picked up Where There Was Fire yet, please do yourself a favor. Go get it now. It's great. You're going to, especially like with the change of weather, you're going to love reading this. We're so excited for you all to read this book. And thank you for being here and chatting with us in the Amigahood, John. We can't wait
Thank
to
you.
come back in maybe 20 years.
I'll see you then.
Right? Let's make a date. Also, I want to thank Gabby for all her behind the scenes work and making sure everything was on point today. And a huge thank you to the Flatiron Book team for this amazing collaboration. Amigas, thank you again for showing up, for helping to make John feel welcome in this space.
Thank
For
you.
being here during our monthly chats. It's always such a treat, and your questions are so insightful. They add so much to our conversation. Gabby's going to be if you haven't picked up the book yet, or if you want to get another copy for a friend, feel free to gift it. Gabby will be putting a link in the chat for the Fabian Flores bookshop, and it'd be wonderful if you could support. That's it, amigas. John, oh my gosh. I'm going to literally, I probably email you 15 more questions that I had in store for you. Buenas noches, everyone. John, mil gracias. Congratulations. Thank you again for being here. Amigas, Thank you for this beautiful time to connect. We'll see you at the end of the month so we can have a discussion about this gorgeous book. Thank you again for
Beautiful.
being here, everybody.